All the founders of Epicurean philosophy were pious men. This may seem shocking to some, as Epicurus has been embraced by many modern atheists as a proponent of secular morality and scientific values. But Epicurus was no atheist. In one source, he reproached atheists as mad Bacchic revellers and admonished them not to trouble or disturb us, mentioning Critias, Diagoras, and Prodicus by name. In his Life of Epicurus, biographer Diogenes Laertius recounts how Epicurus said, "The wise man will set up votive images." The celebrations of the 20th of every month, which were instituted in Epicurus's final will, were religious, and in his epistle to Diotimus, Epicurus is said to have warned against violating the covenant of the sacred festival table. What's more, Epicurus's house was decorated piously for the occasion, and the oaths and invocations of the Epicureans were always religious in nature. In his scroll on piety, Philodemus argues that the founders of the school both produced arguments for the existence of the gods and encouraged their philosophers to participate in worship and to be truly pious. He said this in reply to the argument from opponents that it is foolish to celebrate festivals if gods are indifferent to us. So who are these Epicurean gods? What is their nature? Early Epicureans dedicated much of their time to combating the mythical and unempirical accounts of the nature of things by ancient people. They speculated about the ways in which nature could bring about the phenomena that were attributed to myths, like thunder, rain, writing, and government, etc., without the intervention of divinities and without supernatural claims. Epicurean theology is consistent with this anthropological and scientific approach, and also exemplifies the related practice of redefining words according to nature. Rather than dismissing the word gods, the founders of Epicurean philosophy redefined it by using their method of inference by analogy. They reasoned that, since there is a vast ecology of sentient beings here on Earth, in the other innumerable worlds of the infinite universe, there must also be innumerable ecological systems with beings that are similar to, and also different from, the ones here on Earth. They did not suppose that humans are the apex animal in the universe. Rather, they imagined that beings that are happier than those on Earth must exist elsewhere, and they speculated that some of those beings might even be immortal or near indestructible. And they speculated that these gods were not supernatural, but that they were super-evolved animals whose physical natural bodies were made up of particles, just like animals here on Earth. In order to preserve their immortality, or at least to secure a long life, these gods might inhabit the space between the worlds, known as the metacosmia. The opponents of the Epicureans argued that gods cannot have bodies, for bodies are compounds of atoms, and all things that are composed of atoms are impermanent. They are subject to change, decay, and death. Therefore, because compounds are destructible, these atomic gods cannot be immortal. In his scroll on piety, Philodemus of Gadara replied to this by citing an argument made by Metrodorus, one of the founders of Epicureanism, where he explained that if a compound is made of things that aren't numerically distinct, these things may be imperishable and indestructible, or divine. It's difficult to make sense of this, as the source is incomplete, but we can imagine a superbeing made up of ever-changing cellular compounds that constantly adapts to its environment by virtue of being both a unity and a collective. Philodemus furthermore argued against the accusers who claim that gods can't be physical, saying that this was inconsistent with his opponent's view of gods as having perception and experiencing pleasure. Epicurus believed that the gods were clearly conceived originally by ancient people as eternal and blessed, but that later generations developed defiled ideas about the gods and warned his followers to only hold the purest and holiest beliefs about the gods and to avoid defiled views. To the Epicureans, monotheism is out of the question because nature does not only make a single one of any kind, and a universe that has always existed does not need a creator. Philodemus' scroll on piety laments that things unworthy of indestructibility and blessedness are sought in prayer by common people. And in his epistle to Menocius, Epicurus describes the gods as blissful, immortal beings and forbids his disciples from ascribing to gods anything that is inconsistent with immortality and blissfulness. These two criteria seem to have been inspired in the ideas of the Cyrenaic philosopher Theodorus the atheist, whose theology is believed to have greatly influenced Epicureanism. Furthermore, in the first principal doctrine, we are told that the gods must not be imagined as exhibiting partiality or anger. This relates to the gods' self-sufficiency. A being that is self-sufficient can neither receive harm nor benefit from any other being. Therefore, the Epicureans speculated that, since the gods are self-sufficient and indestructible, natural selection removed the never-invoked vestigial emotions of gratitude and anger. Epicurean gods are conceived to exist elsewhere in the universe and would likely not even know of our existence. If so, then why ought we pray or engage in religious activities? Regarding prayer, Epicurus said that it is intimate to our nature to pray and advised us to pray. This is not because the gods need prayers, but because in this way we can capture the pleasant disposition and perfection of the gods. Epicurean worship is filial rather than fear-based. George Kaplanis, founding member of the Epicurean Garden of Thessaloniki, says that Epicurean prayer activates the mental and ethical forces of man, but it also activates his brain functions, stimulates the mind, and helps to bring inspiration to the person who prays. All this is to say that Epicurus was interested in a materialist theory of piety. In this way, he made a unique contribution to religious ethics. He was interested in the effects of piety on our health and disposition. He didn't dismiss religion, but sought to study and practice it as a natural, empirical, and scientific technique. The Philodemus on piety states, in On Holiness, Epicurus calls a life of perfection the most pleasant and most blessed, and instructs us to guide against all defilement, with our intellect comprehensively viewing the best psychosomatic dispositions for the sake of fitting all that happens to us to blessedness. The reference to psychosomatic dispositions here, within the context of contemplation of the gods, gives us an intriguing insight into Epicurean spirituality as rooted in the body. Sacred symbols help with social cohesion and to cement trust, which is necessary for the Epicurean conception of justice based on social contracts. Since oaths and agreements of peace and mutual benefit were carried out in the name of the gods, these gods were seen as an important component of social cohesion. Philodemus said, "To others, piety appears to include not harming both other people and especially one's benefactors and homeland. To be sure, they honour something rather kindly and propitious, whereas we all regard our views as the true cause of our tranquility." Concerning oath-breaking, he elsewhere says, "Piety and justice appear to be almost the same thing, because to break one's oath is to be unjust and also to lie, and both are disturbing." Although the gods do not concern themselves with mortals, harm and benefit may result from our conception of them. Our views about the gods affect our pleasant disposition, virtue, and tranquility. We see that evil conceptions of the gods defile humans and produce depravity, even in well-meaning people. If people imagine their gods as tyrants, they will suppose bad things will befall them, whereas by imagining the gods as harmless and virtuous, humans will seek to imitate these qualities. According to Philodemus, those who believe our oracles about the gods will first wish to imitate their blessedness, insofar as mortals can, so that, since it was seen to come from doing no harm to anyone, they will endeavour most of all to make themselves harmless to everyone as far as it is within their power, and second, to make themselves noble. The just person has noble expectations concerning the gods, and at the same time exceedingly enjoys pleasures that are unalloyed and effortless. The founders of Epicureanism said, "The veneration of the wise man is a great blessing to those who venerate him." The same could be said of the veneration of the gods, so long as we understand the true purpose of religion, which is to abide in pleasure. The practice of Epicurean piety is meant as a technique to confer upon us the benefit of wholesome association and to cultivate a pleasant disposition. In the letter to Menocius, Epicurus says, "It is not blasphemous to deny the gods that most people believe in, but to ascribe to the gods what most people believe." Epicurean theology offers a moral reform of religion that purges it from supernaturalism, superstition, and fundamentalist zeal, while preserving its innocent and blissful practices. The realist view, according to which gods are natural sentient beings who live in never-ending ataraxia as described by our sages, is the original interpretation of the gods held by the founders of Epicureanism. Some later Epicureans adopted an idealist interpretation, according to which gods are not physical beings, but mental constructs which are therapeutically and culturally useful, but nonetheless imaginary. Epicureans who embrace the idealist view still think that the gods may be useful objects of contemplation, even if they are not real. A third view has been proposed in our generation, according to which belief in gods is neither necessary nor natural, and that their existence cannot be justified using our canon. This is the atheist interpretation, and it argues that Epicurean doctrines are based on the study of nature and on evidence, and we just do not have enough evidence to justify the gods by our method of inference by analogy, which allows us to infer about the non-evident based on the evidence. Therefore, the gods do not pass the test of the Epicurean canon, which is evidence-based. In the end, most of us are happy to remain humble and suspend judgment until further evidence is presented. Philodemus of Gadara says, "It would be fitting to describe all men as impious, inasmuch as no one has been prolific in finding convincing demonstrations for the existence of the gods." If you enjoyed this educational module by the Society of Friends of Epicurus, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, like, comment, subscribe, and share the video on social media.